Welcome back. Happy Festivus for those of you who celebrate. Jared and I had some grievances to air at the end of this show, but for now, we're going to do a quick little Pinstripe Bowl preview before that. And as you notice, our typical host, Pat, is not with us, so you're stuck once again with myself, Tim, and Jared. But there's a good reason for that. It's Pat's birthday, so happy birthday, Pat. Congrats on another year around the sun. But we'll just get right into it. Just some slight news on the coaches front. I think most notably John Heacock, Iowa State's defensive coordinator, who was expected to join Matt Campbell's staff at Penn State in some capacity, maybe as an analyst. He announced today on social media that he is actually just going to retire from coaching altogether after a 43-year career. So congrats to Coach Heacock. But Jared, it sounds to me if Heacock's even going to come to Penn State in the first place, I would think Matt Campbell and his staff feel confident about who they're potentially going to land for defensive coordinator. But my guess would be they're thinking Danton Lynn's ultimately gonna come on board, but just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that it seems like they definitely have someone set, whether that's Lynn or elsewhere. You got to wonder if perhaps Poindexter is in the mix and what he's thinking as far as what he plans to do next season. He'll be serving as defensive coordinator for the Pinstripe Bowl, as I'm sure you know. But yeah, Lynn, it came close to I don't know how close it came to happening last year, but they at least there was conversations a year ago before Knowles was ultimately brought in. Lynn, for those who remember, was a standout safety and corner. Early was that O'Brien era, late Franklin era, I believe. So he really did a tremendous job on the field and just been really just a rising star on the defensive side of the ball. In the profession.
I'm not sure if Dan Lynn ever played under O'Brien. I think 2011 was his senior year. So it was all under Paterno.
Okay. For some reason, I thought he was a little more recent, but now that you mention it, yeah, that does sound right. So a little further out than I recall. But yeah, as a defense coordinator, though, he's just done outstanding work. First at UCLA, has really come a long way in improving USC's defense over the last couple seasons. So I think he would be a tremendous selection to come home to Penn State and lead the defense. We'll see what happens there, but I could see why, I wouldn't say assume, but I could see why you could kind of connect the dots and think, okay, perhaps Lynn is the guy and he'll be leading the defense next year. So something to definitely keep an eye on over the next several days or so.
Absolutely. And another notable, maybe not so much news, but just something I really enjoyed seeing from newly hired offensive line coach Ryan Clanton. He posted this on Twitter the other day. Just for those of you who are just listening to this and can't watch, sharing a screenshot of Ryan Clinton's tweet. It's a wide range, like panoramic view of the Penn State football weight room. And it just says in all caps, ready to run for a wall for this place, period. Dogs only, period. So, of course, he's gotten a lot of good feedback on that statement. So, just how are you feeling about this? I know he'd be a lot, Phil Troutwine's going to Florida, and, reviews on him, I guess they were kind of mixed, you could say.
Mixed is the word I would use, yes.
He was pretty good in some aspects, but then you also were left wondering, could he have done a little more? And, just your thoughts so far, do you think Ryan Clayton could potentially be an upgrade, or do you think he has about maybe the same level of success that Troutwine had?
It's hard to tell. It's just way too early to have a strong opinion on where he's going to fall in the pecking order, in comparison. I will say that, he has done quite a good job with what they've had. I mean, you got to remember Iowa State mostly has 2-3-star guys, the offensive line that they did a really great job developing. So he should have more talent here. Troutwine did a solid, like you said, mixed. He did a solid job in some regards. I mean, he definitely brought the offensive line a lot further than where it was before he took over. And considering the offensive line was just the biggest mess of the sanction era, and that was just a several-year rebuilding process just to get some talent there and bodies, really. I mean, yeah, as we recall all too well that the defensive tackles were moving over and starting an offensive line there for a couple years when Penn State was setting records for most sacks allowed in the season. So it was a major rebuild. He definitely did a great job bringing some talent. The one thing that I think was really going to stand out from his time at Penn State is just whatever the heck happened the first half of the season or so, when we just had these great expectations for the offensive line and they came absolutely nowhere near that. You know, they showed some of that potential the second half of the season. I'd probably say from the Indiana game on, you know, they were much more of a cohesive unit and kind of played at the level, close to the level that we were expecting. But yeah, just I'm not certain what exactly happened, but you know, from the experience and the talent they had returning, and then what the product on the field was for the first half of the season when things were kind of falling apart for not just offensive line, but the entire team. I mean, that was a pretty big whiff on his part, honestly, and just something that where they had a lot of talent, experience, a lot to work with, and just did not get anywhere near the results that they should have.
Yeah, I think time will tell, but well, if his coaching is anything like his tweeting game, then I think the offensive line should be a roaring success in 2026 and beyond. And just one last bit of coaching news, if you can call it news, but Matt Campbell finally sat down with Dave Revson at Big Ten Network, which is a little surprising because usually they do like almost like the day they're hired, they tend to sit down and interview these guys. But you know, he finally got around to doing it. It's definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it yet. It's probably the most lengthy interview I've seen, maybe besides Josh Pate's sit down with Campbell. But you know, I think what stuck out to me, Jared, was he's asked at one point, if I'm remembering correctly, but he's asked at one point, you know, do you feel the pressure of coming into a place like Penn State where expectations are much higher than at Iowa State? And I'm paraphrasing what Dave Revson said, but you know, Campbell's response I really liked. He just, you know, he said like he basically embraced the, you know, the expectations and the fan base and the atmosphere, you know, and just he really exuded throughout the interview just a lot of self-confidence, like but not in like a, you know, super cocky kind of way, but just like, you know, this is a guy who's experienced as a head coach, you know, knows what he wants out of his staff, out of players, knows how to build a program. And, you know, he feels he can, you know, take the things that help make Iowa State successful and apply them to his current job at Penn State. But Jared, I don't know if you had a chance to watch the interview or listen to the interview yourself, but I'm just, you know, if you have any thoughts, you know, we're curious to hear them too.
Yeah, I watched earlier today, and kind of like you said, he when Campbell speaks, he always seems, you know, kind of what you were saying, that he seems confident and sure of himself, but never in an arrogant way. He doesn't seem like he has, you know, much of a public ego, at least, you know. I'm sure he's got a very strong belief in himself, but he just never comes off as cocky or belittling to anyone or anything like that. So I think that's going to really play well with the fan base, because he's just, you know, he really carries himself with class from what I've seen. So it's just good to see, considering, you know, there's Brian Kelly's and other coaches in the world where you kind of have to, you know, if that there's certain coaches that if they are leading your team, you kind of have to stomach it a little bit. It could be a bitter pill to swallow, but Cable will definitely be a guy who's going to be easy to root for sure. Yeah, I think he definitely understands the expectations. I mean, just the guy who was born and raised in Massillon and this football crazed town, and growing up in Ohio, having family in PA, and just kind of understanding the history of Penn State and Big Ten programs. He'll definitely understand the expectations and just the amount of pride that people take in being a fan of this team. So as far as takeaways, I mean, it wasn't anything earth shattering from what he was saying, but he did mention meeting individually with all the players in the team, which is obviously a very important thing to do right now. And just have those honest conversations, talk to guys about what they want, what their expectations are, how they're going to fit in his system, how they're going to fit culturally, what Campbell's about, what he expects of his players and teams. So I'm sure there's a lot of important conversations going on, a lot of honest conversations, and frankly, just a guy's kind of feeling out where they are under this new era of this program, and what the next steps forward will be. Whether that's ultimately going to be staying with Penn State or perhaps deciding to seek opportunities elsewhere.
One thing that I also noticed, he did mention like Joe Paterno again was talking about, the hard-nosed style of play. And I do wonder if it's kind of, if that's something like just deliberate on his part to try and, get certain alums, especially certain board of trustee members on his side, or if that's just kind of what just naturally comes to his mind, first and foremost when he thinks of Penn State football. But I guess time will tell on that one.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. And he does mention, I don't think that's just lip service when he mentions, growing up and visiting relatives from PA and sitting around the table and talking about Paterno and what type of program he's leading at Penn State. So, I think there is some genuineness there. And I wasn't going to bring this up, but since you did, I feel that Campbell may have mentioned Paterno's name more times than Franklin did in his 12-year tenure here already.
Yeah,
he
mentioned him once in the press conference, in his introductory press conference. I think he said something along the lines of the late great Joe Paterno, but that was literally the only time he ever.
Yeah, I never uttered any mentions or any.
I've already counted like 3 times that Campbell's mentioned him so far, so that's like 2 more times than Franklin ever did. So I'm just an interesting observation. I mean, who knows? I don't think it would be mentioned a whole lot going forward, but just maybe name drops him every now and then. But don't want to get into the weeds on that one. Moving on to a little bit of transfer portal news. AJ Harris, starting cornerback, and Kari Jackson, the reserve freshman linebacker, they've both entered the portal. And, Jackson was a guy who he did shine during the spring game. He's a guy that maybe, we thought, I remember writing this because I covered the spring game for BSD, but he was a guy maybe to keep an eye on that potentially could earn some playing time. Never quite happened for him. Harris, I guess you could say, up and down year, to be kind.
It was kind.
I still can't get the image in my head of Griffin Wild, of all people, just running past him for a touchdown catch. I don't know how a guy like Harris gets burned by Griffin Wild, but but he's entering the portal. Who knows where he'll end up? But just how do you feel like this impacts, the Pinstripe Bowl, and all, really more importantly, just how it impacts the depth chart going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to, come down too hard on Harris, but I mean, if we're being honest, I feel like he was probably the most disappointing player on this year's team, just from what we saw of him last year, what the expectations were. I mean, there was a lot of talk about him being the best cornerback in the entire nation, being Penn State's first member of the secondary to be a first-round pick in April, and he just didn't pan out. I don't know what the deal was this year. He was poor in coverage a lot of times. He wasn't a sure tackler, which I thought he was a really physical player last year. Got benched a few games, especially under Terry Smith, where he just didn't think he was flat out getting the job done. And, sat him out and for key stretches in the second half on 2, 3, 4 occasions maybe. So I don't know if it impacts him too much. As far as the immediate impact of the Pinstripe Bowl, sure, they'll be out AJ Harris, Elliott Washington, and Zakee Wheatley was the best member of the secondary throughout the season by a wide margin, I would say. So yeah, that's going to hurt a little bit in the secondary, especially with Clemson's quarterback coming in and playing and not opting out. Besides, despite being a senior and preparing for the NFL draft himself.
Yeah, there'll definitely be something to see going forward. Other portal news, real quick. Bo Pribula, who has entered the portal once again. I'd be shocked if he comes back to Penn State. My guess would be Rocco Becht is gonna end up portaling in and being Penn State's quarterback next year. But there is another school that might be in desperate need of a quarterback and coached by a former Penn State head coach in Virginia Tech. You think he reunites with James Franklin down in Blacksburg?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they had a really strong relationship, and even last year, Pribula had to make a tough decision to transfer, and just because of the time of the transfer portal, he had to leave before the playoff run. But despite that, Franklin, he credited Franklin quite a bit for despite getting ready, preparing for the playoffs. He spent a lot of time making phone calls on Bo's behalf, trying to help him find the right fit, and just really talking him up, and just really promoting him to some of these other schools, despite him leaving Penn State. So, yeah, I think that would be a logical fit for him. It'll be his third team in 3 years. So, but at least it'll be offense. He'll be somewhat familiar with, a staff he's familiar with. Kind of know how to go in there and be a leader, and just how to carry himself day in and day out under Franklin, and just how they operate. So I think that'd be a good fit. And Virginia Tech's building back up. They're going to have a pretty big infusion of talent compared to what they had over the last couple of years under Brent Pry. So be interesting to see how things work out. But I think he could. I don't think Pribula is this he's not the quarterback that we saw against Kansas in the second week when he won all these National Player of the Week awards. He had a phenomenal game, but if you watched him throughout the season, especially against the SEC defenses, he misses a lot of targets. Missouri settles for quite a few third downs. So a lot of the same things you were watching under Aller. So, I like Bo. He's a gritty player and everything, but I don't think he's a type of guy who's going to really elevate an offense and maybe elevate, but not quite carry an offense. He's got his flaws for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think I read something. I don't know if it was for all SEC competition or just against like the cream of the crop, but something like he had 4 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. So against the better defenses in the SEC, they were able to give him problems. Now, ACC, the landscape is not nearly as difficult. And like I said, the talent infusion that James Franklin's already brought in to Blacksburg via recruiting, and I'm sure for the transfer portal, you bring in a guy like Bo to run your offense. I think it's not unreasonable to expect a winning season and bowl game next year if you're a Tech fan. So
yeah,
Chris,
I was saying that's a great point too, with him changing conferences potentially. Those SEC defenses that he struggled against, he's not going to be facing anywhere near that. Possibly Miami, but I don't know their schedule off the top of my head, but they're going to be having games against the likes of BC and Wake Forest and Virginia and some of these other defenses that just aren't nearly as sturdy as the ones you see in the SEC week in, week out.
Right, and just one more bit of transfer portal news. Chaz Coleman, who, as we all know, entered the portal the other week, he is now being favored to end up at Ohio State, which probably comes to a shock to almost nobody who's been paying attention. But my question to you, Jared, is do you think Chaz Coleman will ever suit up as a Buckeye against Penn State? Now, keep in mind, Penn State and Ohio State are not scheduled to play each other again until 2028.
So Chaz has 2 more years of eligibility. Maybe he sticks for around for a 3rd season. So we're saying that Penn State and Ohio State will either be playing the Big Ten championship game or a playoff game.
Well, he was just finished his freshman year, so he has 3 years of eligibility.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean he'll be around for at least 2 years.
Oh, right. Okay. So
NFL draft. Yeah, maybe 3. So either 2 or 3 seasons at Ohio State. I'm going to say a bold prediction and say yes, they will play. I'll go a playoff game 2028.
Okay, so we're thinking like New Year's Day 2028, or maybe even like early January 2028 in a semifinal game, or maybe in the national championship even.
Yeah. So 2020
I like
season, yeah, calendar year 2028, but
27, 28 season.
In a 27 season, yes, yeah. That's my bold prediction.
Okay.
And he gets 0 sacks. So let's clip this and pull this up when Penn State, beats Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. They play that day. We can dream, right?
I can certainly. Well, look, I mean, next year my expectations are a little, even with the potentially favorable schedule. I mean, I'm not expecting them to be playing for a Big Ten title, but depending on how recruiting goes, portal recruiting goes, especially. No, it's not. I could see maybe the 2027 Big Ten championship, those 2 teams meeting up. So it's a possibility.
It's very early in a coaching cycle, so this is the time to be unreasonably optimistic.
Yeah, I'm going to say they meet in the 2027 Big Ten championship in Indy.
Excellent.
So, I'm not going to predict a winner for that, but I'll say they will. Chaz and Penn State will meet up again before his playing career is over. Before we get into our Pinstripe Bowl preview, just want to encourage those of you who are watching and you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our channel, especially if you like what you see here. As last I checked, we had 575 subscribers today, which is amazing when I think back. It was about 4 months ago this time, Jared. We had just gotten over 200 subscribers, and this channel started in August of last year, 2024. And so just in the last 4 months alone, we've grown by over 350 subscribers, which is just incredible and not something we could have envisioned. I guess having such a topsy-turvy roller coaster of a season might do that for you, but just want to thank each and every one of you who subscribed to us, and all those of you who are currently watching us, all 16 of you, please check to see if you are subscribed, and if you're not, then please do us a favor. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, so that's our next big goal here. So I know we got a little ways to go, but we can do this, folks. So that's the end of my little discussion there. Now, part you've been waiting for, the Pinstripe Bowl preview. Jared, I know you're our guy who writes up the previews, and I got to say, I don't envy you at all having to write up the preview for this game, because I can't keep up with all the opt-outs going on the Penn State and the Clemson side. So just, I guess what are your keys to the game, really? I mean, now just without really knowing who's all is going to be suiting up, or even those that are suiting up, maybe they're only going to play a series or 2. Like, I'm thinking maybe Katron Allen only plays a series or 2. Like,
agreed.
So,
yeah. So I will be honest, I waited until today to write the majority of it, because I didn't want to, start too far in advance and constantly doing revisions as more and more players are opting out for both teams. So I hate saying this, but it will be in some aspect a bit of an exhibition, because you're going to have to be without a lot of guys on both teams, and without a lot of key players. So I don't know if you want to start with Ohio State with Penn State or Clemson. But Penn State, I think that the key opt-outs on defense are Zane Durant, Zakee Wheatley, Alex Tash, unfortunately, was injured in bowl preparation, so he won't be available. So one of the key reserves at linebacker will be out for this game. And Zariah Fisher, we just learned will not be playing. So defensive end is going to be very thin without Chaz Coleman, without Zariah. And Denai Dennis Sutton has not opted out yet, but I have a hard time believing he's going to get a whole lot of snaps. Someone I'm not really expecting to see in the second half. Maybe exits a little bit earlier than that. I mean, he's a guy with a very bright NFL future ahead of him, so I just don't expect him to be playing a whole lot. So that will be interesting to see how the defense shapes up. For Clemson, their opt-outs, I do understand their opt-outs are a lot more on the defensive side of the ball than the offense, but according to Dabo, he said there's going to be 7 starters out on each side of the ball. So that's, that's not a great situation to be in. But the key for Clemson, though, is Cade Klubnik will be playing quarterback. He's a 3-year starting quarterback for them. And he was a guy that came in the season. Some mock drafts had him as the first overall pick. He was, a Heisman candidate. I think either me or Pat, or maybe even both of us, predicted him as the Heisman winner in one of our preseason episodes. So very high expectations for him, and he just didn't quite live up to those. I think his draft stock has fallen off quite a bit. Definitely not considered a first-round pick anymore. And, I mean, he had an okay season. It just wasn't this prolific year that people were expecting out of him. 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So just kind of okay. Wasn't lighting up defenses. Did have a few good games where he threw for close to 400 yards, but also had a lot of kind of middling games where he was just throwing for about 150. So a little inconsistent for him, but he does have the experience, and he's going to be playing against a Penn State defense that I kind of wonder if the pass rush is really going to be there with all the absences at defensive end. And also Zane Durant not being able to cause disruptions in the middle of the field. He's by far the best defensive tackle on the squad, I would say. So it could be a good day for a big day for Klubnik. He will be without one of his top receivers. I believe AJ Williams, if I'm recalling correctly. But he does have a few other very highly productive receivers this year. They're going to have their starting running back in there who finished the season really strong. I apologize for not having this in front of me, but their starting running back actually had a good ending of the season, and he is 6'2", 230. So he's one of those guys to keep an eye on how they use him, because he's a guy that can definitely wear down a defense and kind of get stronger as the game goes on. So, and again, against a depleted defense, that may be a little bit easier than it typically would. So on the flip side, though, Penn State could have the same opportunities on offense, because Clemson is out a lot of guys on defense, and pretty much all their difference makers. They're losing their best safety, their best corner, who is a first-team All Big Ten selection. They're going to be missing Peter Woods, who's a first-team defensive tackle, TJ Parker, who is a really, really good defensive end, really good guy off the edge, who they'll miss. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correct, but Wade Wood is. Who's a linebacker, who's a second leading tackler on the team, and just one of those guys who just plays sideline to sideline and just kind of an overall disruptive player. So they'll be missing him quite a bit too. So I think the keys for Penn State is just to see what Grunkmeyer does. He's a guy that I think with every game he's gotten better, like visibly shown visible improvement from game to game. So I'm excited to see what he does with, a couple extra weeks of bowl prep and, how he looks. I believe Penn State will have all their receivers, and I'm kind of curious if we see more targets thrown Kobe Howard's way. Someone who I'd really like to see as a key piece of the receiving core for next year. And the other person I'm kind of wondering if we see is Tyseer Denmark. He only had 2 catches this year. There's been a lot of buzz about him the last 2 years and just hasn't really had a whole lot of opportunities. So it'd be nice to see, him see more of the field, although, Penn State starting receivers should be there. And I don't know what to expect them as far as snap counts, if they're going to be in the full game. If I mean, they are 3 seniors, so I'm not certain what to expect there, but wouldn't be surprised if we see more of Howard and Denmark. And the player who I think was going to have a really big game is Andrew Rapplier. He came on strong the second half of the season. Kind of not quite at Tyler Ward's level, but someone who can definitely fill that role and do a little bit of everything. From the tight end position, whether it's blocking and just kind of using him in a variety of ways to get the ball in his hands. So I think we're going to see a big game out of Rapplier against a bit of a depleted Clemson front seven. And that is their strength by far. So the other thing I want to mention too is they were very good against the run, but their secondary was poor. I think they were finished like 116th in pass defense this year. So you're taking a secondary that's already struggling against some, pretty average ACC quarterbacks, and then you're taking away their best safety and their best cornerback. So I like to see what Grunkemeyer can do. He should have his opportunities. But I think the big thing we need to discuss a little bit, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, is what will Penn State's running game look like? Because we already know Singleton will be out. As we've alluded to, we're not expecting to see a lot of Katron, although it would be cool to see him say, you know what, I'm going to smash my record. Let me play this entire game. But I don't see that happening just because, like we were just saying with Denai Dennis Sutton, he's got a bright future ahead of him. He's going to be preparing for the NFL draft and doesn't really need to be put in a situation where he's carrying the ball 30 times when he needs to turn around and, be preparing to run his 40 and all this other training that he's going to need to be doing to prepare for the combine, where he'll be a certain draft pick in the spring. So, but anyways, back to the running backs that we will be seeing. Let me just ask you before I get into any further into that, because I've been talking a while, but what are your expectations for the running backs? Who do you think we're going to see when Allen's not on the field?
Yeah, I'm thinking, chance for Corey Smith to shine. He's probably the one, non-Singleton or Allen running back who's gotten any real game action this year, it feels like. So I think he's showing off nice burst of speed every time he sets foot out there. So I think and with Clemson having a bunch of opt-outs defensively, I mean, he could potentially do some damage on the ground. Also keep an eye on guys like Cam Wallace, Quentin Martin, even true freshman Tyke Hayes was supposedly doing well in fall camp. So really it's a chance for all these running backs not named Nick Singleton or Katron Allen to try and showcase themselves either to, Matt Campbell's staff or to a potential future staff like that they might portal over to. I would imagine at least maybe 2 of these guys end up hitting the portal in the end. So, but yeah, I think it's a chance. I'm thinking Corey Smith especially. I'm going to be keeping an eye on him. I think he could have a big game potentially.
Agree.
Another thing maybe you probably know this, but Clemson's defensive coordinator is none other than Tom Allen. I feel like, I'm hoping Andy Kolnick dials up some slant passes to attack that defense with. Seems kind of vulnerable to those types of passes.
Yeah, it would be nice if they can get the ground game going early and use the play action, which is, Grunkmeyer's been so effective there towards the end of the season. So if they can do that, even without, Singleton and perhaps Allen. Before we move on, while we're talking about Allen, though, what would you set the over-under for Allen's carries on Saturday?
I'm going to say 5.5.
Oh, okay. I would say like 8.5 or so. I was my guess.
Okay, a little bit higher.
So no, I mean, so you're expecting even less time than I am.
I'm thinking maybe like the first series and then he sits.
Yeah. Let him.
There's no reason for him to really be playing even. I mean, he's got the record. He's got to, he's make sure he preserves himself for the combine and NFL draft. I think he'll test well and he'll be a solid, Oh, he could be a day 2 pick potentially, because I think day 2 covers rounds 2 and 3.
2 and
Like,
3, yeah. I
you
think
know,
that'd
like
be
I can
my
see
pick.
him maybe as like a like maybe up to a 3rd round guy
Mhm.
potentially.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I was a little surprised he hasn't opted out yet, and that's kind of one of the things I was waiting for to write the game preview to, kind of see some of these guys like him and Sutton, who I was thinking likely would opt out, but appears maybe they won't be. So, but anyway, yeah, I think we're on the same page here. Not expecting a huge day from Allen as far as time on the field. But yeah, Corey Smith is someone I'm glad you mentioned him. He's got really nice wiggle to him. So he's shown some good elusiveness and a burst of speed. Hopefully he's bulked up a little bit. I remember last year when he got some playing time towards the end of games and just thinking like this guy's like one big hit away from being lost for the season. I mean, he just looked doesn't quite look the part yet as a freshman last year, but I'm sure he's been spending time in the training room and the weight room and working on that. But yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for the running backs, whether it's Martin and Wallace in addition to Smith. We'll probably see a few different guys get carries, and hopefully they can prove themselves. I mean, they'll definitely be running with fresh legs. I mean, we thought we'd be seeing more of a, whoever end up as that 3rd running back, we thought we'd see them on the field a lot more in this offense this year, and that just wasn't the case. So they will definitely have some fresh legs, and there's a lot of untapped potential there, and hopefully, they can start reaching that on Saturday and have a strong game because, you don't know what you're going to get with a lot of players in this team with so many reserves coming in, and some of those guys are going to shine and not be much of a drop off of the guys who are in the field, and some of them will be significantly, a drop in quality. So just be kind of interesting to see where those shake out for both teams with each position group, and just because when you have that many absences, it's just going to impact your game plan. You have linemen in there that you don't know if they can run block or pass block well. You've got inexperienced running backs who you don't know how they're going to play at this level, so it really does just impact the overall game plan when you just have that many absences and that many new faces for both sides of the ball.
Right. And before we move on, prediction, if you have one.
I am actually going to go with a fairly high scoring game, assuming the forecast remains steady. Right now, it's saying it's going to be a cold day. So last I checked earlier today, it was a high of 32, but no rain or sleet or anything. So I could see both quarterbacks having a big game. Honestly, I've been going back and forth on who I think will win. So when my game preview is published on Thursday on Christmas morning, it may be different. But right now, I'll just stick with the optimistic pick and say Penn State. I'll say Penn State 35, Clemson 31. I'm kind of thinking a similar game to Rutgers, where we see a little bit of a shootout.
Okay, I have it a little lower scoring. I have 23-20 Penn State.
Okay.
Thinking maybe Ryan Barker with a walk-off field goal to win it, similar to Sam Ficken and kicking the game-winning extra point in overtime in the last time they played in the Pinstripe Bowl. I really don't know what to make of this game, to be honest, with all the opt-outs. But when that's the case, I'm just going to err on the side of being a homer and picking Penn State here. But very little was surprising about how this game plays out on Saturday.
Absolutely.
So we'll be interested to see how this plays out. And programming note, Jared and I will be doing a live post-game show after the Pinstripe Bowl on Saturdays. So be sure to check that out. But with that being said, Jared, we're going to move on and pick our college football playoff quarterfinal games. So we're going to start New Year's Eve, 7:30 on ESPN. Miami taking on Ohio State. The Buckeyes are 9.5-point favorites over the Canes, who upset Texas A&M on the road in the first round. Jared, who do you got here?
I really want to take Miami with nearly 10 points. I mean, I believe in just how strong they are in both lines of scrimmage. But I don't know how much I trust Carson Beck against the Ohio State defense. And I just think, like we saw against A&M, they're going to have a hard time moving the ball, and I think Ohio State will eventually be able to pull away somewhat, win by at least 10 points. So, yeah, give me Ohio State in the points, but just barely.
I think we're similar thoughts. I just think Ohio State's that defense is just suffocating, and I think they're a more explosive team offensively than
Absolutely
A&M. So I think also I believe this is I want to say it's the Cotton Bowl, so it's going to be being played indoors, and so weather's not going to be
yes, it is Cotton Bowl. Yep,
weather's not going to be a factor in this one. Like I remember at A&M, it was very windy, and it affected kicking.
Yes,
even affects passing in those circumstances too. So
absolutely, yeah. There was, I don't know how many times I saw the ball. I don't think it was just bad passing. The balls were just like sailing whenever they leave the quarterback's hands. And actually, on that note, I just want to mention real quick. I don't know if you saw the College Game Day kicker.
Yes, I was about to say,
I felt so bad for that kid because he had a really good kick and the wind just carried it far right.
At the last second, it looked like he was gonna.
Good, yeah. Talk about all-time heart. You could just see the heartbreak of that poor dude's face. So good effort, but Mother Nature had other plans.
Very foretelling for how game was going to go for the kickers on both sides. I mean, there was plenty of missed kicks like that to go around. So yes, we both agree. We got the Buckeyes. I did forget to say last week, I don't keep unfortunately Pat's the one who keeps the stats on these picks, but I did get my Alabama and Oregon predictions correct last week. I don't remember who you picked, Jared, but perhaps you did as well as me, or maybe slightly better, but we'll keep that here. So Jared and I both have the Buckeyes. Next game, first of 3 New Year's Day playoff games. So Oregon beat up on James Madison. They take on Texas Tech. The Ducks are a 1.5 point favorite here. Jared, I think I'm leaning towards Oregon on this one, and maybe it's just my Big Ten bias, but I know Texas Tech is pretty explosive offensively, but I don't know. I guess it's hard for me to. Maybe I just have a harder time taking Big 12 teams seriously.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Texas Tech, I do think they have a very solid defense. Got a lot of NFL talent on that side of the ball. Their offense, like you said, they can be explosive, but they come across as one of those boomer bust type of offenses. And
they are second in the country in points per game.
Okay. I don't think I quite realized they were quite as prolific, but I just remember whenever I've watched them, it just felt like they really depended on scoring off of turnovers and big plays rather than just moving the ball steadily, which will be interesting to see how they can drive the ball. Because this Oregon defense, it isn't quite as good as the last couple of years that we've seen out of Oregon. They're not great against stopping the run, but they're still, one of the better defenses nationally for sure. So maybe not be elite at the level of Ohio State and some of these Georgia and some of these others that are still in the playoffs, but pretty darn good defense. So yeah, and I totally agree with you about trying how to judge Texas Tech, because I mean, the only really good team they played this year was BYU, and they smacked them both times they played them. But I mean, nothing against BYU, but how good are they compared to, other playoff teams? So I don't know. I just think Oregon they finished strong considering how beat up they were. And I know they have a lot of guys coming back from injury, and I guess it's possible Evan Stewart may be back for the first time all year at receiver. So that'll be interesting to see if he's able to hit the field and be productive. So yeah, I'll go by. I think this will be a really fun, enjoyable game. Two teams that aren't quite familiar with each other. So yeah, really looking forward to this one. This is the noon kick on New Year's Day, but I think I like Oregon to win by like 7 or 8. So I'll take Oregon and lay the 1.5 points.
All right, so Jared and I also agree on Oregon. So second game of the day on New Year's Day, playoff-wise, Alabama and Indiana at the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. The Hoosiers are a 7-point favorite in this one. Jared, who do you got?
Can I just say how weird it is to look at this and see the Indiana -7, playing this plucky 8 seed Alabama. So it's just
Bizarro world we live
it
in,
is
Jared.
truly bizarre world. Just I don't know. This is something you couldn't even dream up a couple years ago. Um, I think I just have to go Indiana. I just think they're just so well disciplined. I mean, that defensive game plan against Ohio State and just how good they were in coverage and just guys just know their assignments and know where to be. And the thing that really amazes me, I mean, what Omar Cooper left the Big Ten championship game early, and then just like against Penn State, they put their backup receivers in and they're going, making these incredible catches. And I mean, they're just. I just can't say enough about how amazing job Signetti's done overall with the team. I mean, they've gotten so much better line of scrimmage. Their defensive line is nasty. I mean, they were in Sands' face all day in Indianapolis. So Alabama, I think they have a not a great defense, but pretty darn good defense. Their offense, I don't know about because they don't really run the ball well at all. They really have to. They can really be turned one-dimensional, which I think Indiana's going to do to them. And I think the way that Indiana's able to pressure the quarterback, I think if you turn them into one-sided attack, it's not going to be good for the Tide. So I'm going to go with Indiana. And I'll lay the points. I'll take Indiana by 10 against the Tide, which again I have a hard time comprehending that's my honest opinion, but that's where we are, and hats off to Indiana.
I think I agree pretty much, but just to be a contrarian, I'm taking Alabama to cover here. I do think Bama. I was impressed with how they rallied from an early 17-0 hole at Oklahoma on the road and, came back and, been beating them by 10 points. I don't think it's anything to scoff at. I know you could say, well, maybe Oklahoma's not that good, but, to go on the road like that and, get off to such a rough start and then ride like that. I mean, it speaks to the character of this Alabama team. I do think Indiana, talent in key spots is going to win out in the end. But like I said, Alabama's defense, I think they can keep that Hoosier offense relatively in check and keep this one from, getting out of hand. So, I'm going to say maybe Indiana by like 4 to 5 points in this one.
I can see that.
So, and last but not least, we got Ole Miss and Georgia. The Bulldogs are 6.5 point favorites. Jared, what do you think about this one?
I really like Georgia, but I think I'm going to take Ole Miss in the points. I do think this will be a close game. It was one of the best games of the year. This is another rematch. I think that the third rematch of the playoffs we've seen so far. So what I like about Georgia is that they were a very young team to start the season. They definitely didn't look like anywhere close to the level of recent Georgia teams we've seen under Kirby. But man, they've just improved week to week. The defense has just gotten so much better. I mean, a lot of these young guys that were unknowns at the start of the season, they've really developed and become difference makers. So I'm just really impressed with where Georgia has come, how far along they've come. They did have a bit of a comeback to beat Ole Miss when they played. I want to say that was like early October. So it was, in college football time, it was a bit ago, and obviously lots changed for both programs since then. Ole Miss, I don't think they're as good as Georgia, but I'm kind of curious just how they're going to play. I think they're going to play well. And I think it's one of those things that with everything they went through at the end of the season, I do think that is actually going to help the team, rally around one another, really play for each other, play for the coaches who stayed there, and just, really put in a maximum effort. So I do think Georgia's going to come out on top. I think they're the better team, but I think they're gonna win a close one. So give me Ole Miss in points.
I can see where you're coming from. I'm going to take Georgia to cover. But I just feel like Georgia has really been rounding into form lately, and Ole Miss, I'll say I was impressed with how they looked against Tulane, their playoff game. But 6.5 is not a whole. I mean, all it takes is like, okay, maybe Georgia's up by 3 and late. Ole Miss is driving. Maybe they throw a pick 6 or something, and suddenly it's a 10-point Georgia lead. I mean, I just feel like this one just screams for me to take Georgia to cover in this one. So I'm taking the dogs. So just to recap, Jared and I both agree on Ohio State over Miami, and we're taking to cover Miami, and Oregon to cover in Texas Tech. We disagree on Alabama and Indiana. He's got Indiana, I have Alabama. We disagree on this game. He's got Ole Miss. I got Georgia. So we shall see who comes out for the better in these ones. Of course, if Pat wants to send his picks in at some point, he's free to do so. Last but not least, is Festivus, as I mentioned at the top of this broadcast. If you're not familiar, just do a quick search on YouTube. Type in Seinfeld Festivus. It's a Seinfeld-inspired holiday, and one of the traditions in Festivus is the airing of grievances, in which you tell everyone the ways they've disappointed you this year. And we did have put up a post earlier today on blackshoediaries.com. Check us out there. But I'm going to start with, I have a couple of grievances of my own, Jared. My first is with the media, and just, what in the last several years, every time Penn State lost to Ohio State or Michigan or some other big named opponent, it was always them saying James Franklin can't win big games, and and they act like, oh, Penn State should consider moving on, finding someone who can. And then the moment Penn State actually does heed their advice, they do a complete 180, and now it's, no, how could you fire James Franklin? He's the best you're ever going to do. And, just like suddenly he was this great coach who couldn't do much wrong. And, College Game Day is running defense for him. And, it was just, it just kind of made me sick to my stomach to see all that happen. So, just pick a lane, folks. Is James Franklin not able to win big games, or is he capable of doing so? And, just hadn't, for whatever reason, hasn't happened. My other grievance is just with the Big Ten in general, specifically the schedule makers. It's December 23rd as we're recording this, and we still don't know the dates of when Penn State is playing its Big Ten football games next year. If you look on the website, it's the opponents, but you just don't know what day specifically. And I don't know about you, Jared, but I would kind of like to maybe get back to a game in Happy Valley next year and see the new look Nittany Lions, or maybe, someone who lives a half hour from College Park, Maryland, maybe go see them when they play the Terps next year. Or maybe you're someone who's wants to go out to Seattle, make a trip out of it while you watch Penn State play the Washington Huskies, experience what Husky Stadium has to offer. But you can't do that without knowing when the freaking dates are. And we still don't have them. From what I've read, it sounds like we may not even know until next month. And I feel like all the other major conferences have announced their 2026 schedules at this point. And we're just waiting on the Big Ten to do so. So
yeah, I can never remember a scenario where Penn State ended the season, you couldn't already look ahead at the next year's schedule and kind of start planning ahead, or at least start thinking about, how the season may shape up at least. That I'm with you on that one for sure.
And Jared, I know you got a couple grievances of your own, if you want to share those.
Yeah, so There's so many things that we could, since this is a holiday where you share your disappointments, there's so many things that we could look back on this Penn State football season. But I'm not going to do that with this time, just because we've spent, the past several months doing that weekly on here. Going back to late September, early October, we were just completely baffled about the state of the team. But again, we've covered that in great detail. So I'm going to point my ire towards the playoff selection committee and just the playoff format itself. I mean, we finally got to a place where we have this expanded playoff system. It's really just incredible to have so many teams alive and playing in a tournament compared to what we've had, whether it was going back when we were younger, when we both started following college football, there wasn't even a BCS at that point. So it's just like everybody go to your bowl game for conference affiliation, and then we'll just try to figure things out and vote from there, to the BCS, or just 1 versus 2 based off of the computer rankings. Then a 14 playoff, which is just, a little too slim, always going to leave out a lot of, deserving teams. So my biggest gripe is that we have all these different rules of saying who's in, who's out, and my big gripe is that we're allowing all the conference champions in, which, okay, great. I like that we're giving more teams an opportunity. But then what we're doing, though, is we have this great product, and then we're just kind of muddling it, because if you look at the first round, half the games were basically unwatchable. You kind of knew the outcome heading in. Where I'm talking about Ole Miss and Tulane. They played early in the season, and Ole Miss won 45-10. And what do you know? They play again in the playoffs, and what was the final on Saturday? 42-10, almost the same exact score. And then you get James Madison in, and great for the Dukes, very happy for them, but they're just so physically mismatched against a team like Oregon, where they just don't have a chance. It's like if me and you went to our local Y and played, flag football, we could probably hold our own. But if we're going against, I'm trying to think of someone who is about our age, like Dion Butler or Derek Williams or one of those players from that era, I'm sure they would run right past us every single play. At least I know they would for me. You might be a little quicker than me, but what I'm getting at is that it's just such a physical mismatch that a team like James Madison isn't going to have a chance. So if you just went with the top 12, you'd be looking at Notre Dame at Ole Miss, and I believe it would have been Vanderbilt at Oregon. I mean, how great would that have been to watch those games on Saturday, in addition to the other 2 that we saw Friday night and the Miami-Florida game? What I'd like to see eventually is just go to a 16-team format like they do in all the other divisions, like they've been doing for years and years. Go to your top 16 teams and have them play it out. You don't need to have.
I would play the first 2 rounds on the higher seeds home field.
Yeah, I would love to see that too. But yeah, I think you just get more competitive matchups, and there's no rules saying that you need to let in these certain teams based off of this. And the other thing that is just, I really hope this changes, but going in next year, Notre Dame will be automatically in if they finish in the top 12, which is just such BS, because nobody else in the nation is going to get that guarantee, And then if you look at Notre Dame's schedule for next year, it's going to take a minor miracle for them not to, at least finish 10-2 and finish in the top 12 and be a shoe-in for the playoffs. So yeah, let's just figure out a system here where we're just getting the best teams out there and playing. I don't want to be the guy who's saying the little guy shouldn't have a chance, but if you look at this era of college football, with all the player movement, they've kind of organized themselves into like the minor leagues in baseball, where there's just going to be a big talent gap when you go from, different level, different conferences. And yeah, let's just find a way to get the best matchups with the best teams in the field in the playoffs.
I felt bad for James Madison. I think like the play calling was good, but you could just tell they just didn't have the athletes to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they could have played their best game of the season by far. Oregon could have their worst game of the season by far, and I don't think Oregon had much to worry about, honestly.
I think it's also maybe a consequence of of the transfer portal of NIL, like because you think about Kurt Signetti brought a lot of his James Madison guys with him to Indiana. I mean, guys like Aiden Fisher and and just like those are people who maybe in another time they would have still been at James Madison and they might have had a more formidable team.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying they would have beaten Oregon, but they could have given them a harder time, perhaps.
Yeah, play this game
kind of one of the consequences.
Yeah, I'm totally agree with that point.
By the way, I got some breaking news here as of about 10 minutes ago. Pete Thamel, ESPN's insider, tweeting that South Carolina expected to hire Deion Barnes as their defensive line coach, their defensive ends and outside linebackers coach. As you know, he's been the D-line coach for the last 3 years, was a grad assistant for a couple of years before that. Obviously, for me, it's kind of a surprising and disappointing turn because it really seemed like it was leaning towards him staying on with Matt Campbell's staff. But I don't know if maybe Campbell has somebody else in mind he wants to bring in, or if Deion himself decided maybe he wasn't a good fit with this new staff. But definitely not the news I was hoping to read.
Yeah, and Deion was one of those guys. I believe he committed right after the sanctions. I could be wrong. I have to look that up, but I know he was around that area or that era. So
he might have been on a team already during that time and just stuck around.
He may have been possibly a redshirt freshman, or that was his first year of heavy playing time under O'Brien. But either way, he's done a really good job with the defensive line last few years. If you recall, he wasn't a big name at all outside of Penn State, at least in the coaching profession. So a lot of people thought Penn State would go with a more experienced hire, but everybody was just very impressed with Barnes and thought he was ready for opportunity. And I think he proved that he was. So yeah, I was hoping to see him and Dan Connor back on the coaching staff next year rather. But Thamel knows everyone in the college football world, and he is almost never wrong. So I'd say it's I'd say you could probably definitely buy into that report, and Deion Barnes is on his way out, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we'll have a post on blackshoediaries.com soon enough. Speaking of which, before we go, just one more quick pitch. You like what you see here? You haven't subscribed yet? Please do so. We're at 575 subscribers before we started today. Got a goal of hitting 1,000. So help us take some steps towards getting there by subscribing if you haven't already. And on behalf of all of us as Black Shoe Diaries, wishing you all who celebrate a Merry Christmas, and we will see you guys right after the Pinstripe Bowl. Pat will actually be at the game himself, so it'll be Jared and I once again, the Bash Brothers hosting the post-game show for you. So we'll see you all then.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, everyone.